Welcome back, deep divers. Today we are diving into Connie Riker's The Mirage of Male Supremacy.
Wow. Yeah.
And
That's a provocative one.
it's a book that's making some serious waves. It doesn't just question the idea of male dominance, it flips the whole script.
It does. I mean, just that title alone gets your attention, right?
Absolutely.
Riker really sets out to dismantle what she calls the fabricated idea of male dominance.
Yeah.
And she wants to expose the real power dynamic underneath female power.
Which, let's be honest, is a pretty bold claim.
It is, and she doesn't shy away from it.
No, not at all. She tackles everything from history and psychology
Right.
to religion and politics. Like she's saying, look, female influence is everywhere. You just have to know where to look.
And I think one of the most fascinating things Riker does is using history to kind of turn the tables on that whole male dominance is natural argument.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
She dives into these examples of matriarchal societies, like the Mosuo in China and the Khasi in India, where women have historically held significant power, like for real power.
This is blowing my mind a little.
Yeah.
Talk about challenging those ingrained beliefs.
I know, right? And you start to think, like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
If male dominance isn't this universal law,
Yeah.
then what is it? And Riker argues it's a social construct. It's this story we've been told for centuries to keep women down.
So by shining a light on these matriarchal societies, she's essentially saying,
Yeah,
hey, look, things haven't always been this way.
exactly.
There are different ways to structure power, different ways to think about leadership.
And that historical context
Yeah.
is what sets the stage for her whole exploration of feminism. So she traces its evolution from this like radical idea to what she calls a cornerstone of social justice.
I love that she doesn't just praise feminism blindly, though.
Yes.
She actually critiques the different waves, pointing out their limitations and blind spots.
Oh, totally.
Like, for example, how the early waves focus mainly on white, middle-class women,
Yeah, definitely.
and how the third wave's emphasis on individualism could sometimes overshadow collective action.
Right. And that's kind of like Riker saying, okay, feminism has come a long way, but we need to keep pushing. We need to keep making it more inclusive and radical.
And then comes the real bombshell: female supremacy. Not just equality, but actual superiority.
And she even goes so far as to ask, could it be because we're simply better? Talk about a mic drop moment.
Right. And it's such a brilliant question because it forces us to confront our deepest assumptions about gender.
Yeah.
Like, are we so conditioned to believe in male dominance
Right.
that we can't even fathom the possibility of female superiority?
And from there, she goes deep into the psychology of female power.
Right.
This concept called stereotype threat.
Okay.
The idea that internalized beliefs about female inferiority are actually holding women back.
So it's like we're not just fighting external barriers, but also these internalized beliefs that we've absorbed from society.
Exactly. If you're constantly told you're not as good as men, you might start to believe it, even subconsciously. And that belief can impact your performance, your choices, even your aspirations.
That's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It is.
We limit ourselves before we even give ourselves a chance.
And that's why Riker argues that we need to kind of deconstruct those limiting beliefs.
Right.
We need to embrace the power that women already possess.
I love that. Embrace the power. She also tackles that whole biological determinism argument.
Oh, yeah, that one's a doozy.
This idea that our biology dictates our roles and abilities.
Yeah, like we're hardwired to be a certain way because of our chromosomes.
And she just dismantles it.
She tears it apart. Like, no, it's not our biology that's holding us back, but societal conditioning.
So we've been taught to believe these things about gender,
Mm-hmm.
that women are weaker or less rational,
Right.
more emotional,
And that men are, the opposite,
Yeah.
strong, logical.
or protector.
But those are just stories, narratives used to justify male dominance.
It's like, throw those old biology textbooks out the window. We're not defined by our chromosomes.
Exactly.
We're capable of so much more.
And that brings us to kind of another key concept that Riker introduces,
Okay.
this idea of gynocentrism.
Okay, now I'm really curious. Break this down for me. What exactly is gynocentrism?
In Riker's view, it's the idea that society, whether we admit it or not, is actually structured to prioritize women and their needs.
Really?
And she's not saying this is about hating men or anything like that.
Okay.
It's about recognizing the power dynamics that already exist.
And she uses some pretty interesting examples like the media's tendency to portray women as victims and the expectation for men to always be the providers, always holding doors, paying for dates.
So chivalry things, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which, on the surface, seem harmless.
Right, they do.
But Riker argues they contribute to a system where men are constantly expected to serve and protect women.
It's all part of that gynocentric structure.
Wow, I've never thought of it that way before.
It's definitely eye-opening.
And it makes me want to look at the world with a whole new lens.
Me too. And believe me, Riker just gets started there.
Oh, I'm sure of it. This is a deep dive that I think we're going to be talking about for a long time.
I agree. She goes on to deconstruct some major myths that have been used to prop up that whole idea of male supremacy.
Oh, like the wage gap, for example.
Precisely. But we'll dive into all that and more right after a quick break.
Okay, deep divers, we're back and ready to, really go down the rabbit hole with Riker's vision of the future.
A future ruled by female supremacy.
Yeah, I gotta say, it's both exciting and a little bit, I don't know,
Yeah.
scary.
I get it. It's definitely uncharted territory.
Yeah.
And Riker doesn't shy away from those implications.
Not at all. She literally asks us to imagine a world where all those familiar sayings are flipped on their head.
Right. Instead of a woman's place is in the kitchen.
Which, I hate that saying.
The worst.
She's like, what if it's a man's place is in the kitchen?
Exactly. Or think about those big budget action movies,
Yeah.
where it's the woman saving the damsel in distress.
Oh my gosh. I would watch that in a heartbeat.
Right. And it's such a mind-bending exercise,
Totally.
Riker wants us to, fully visualize
Yeah.
what it would look like if all those deep-seated social norms
Yeah.
were just totally reversed.
It makes you realize how much we just take those norms for granted.
Yeah.
We just assume men will be the breadwinners and women will be the caregivers.
It's it's just ingrained in us,
Yeah, totally. But what if it was the other way around?
Right, and that's a question Riker's asking.
Yeah.
And she goes beyond just those surface level norms.
Right.
She gets into how would this power shift impact everything? Gender dynamics, societal structures, the whole shebang.
Oh, that is a big question. Would men adapt to these new roles? Or would there be resistance? Would it lead to a truly equal society or just a flipped version of the patriarchy?
Exactly. And those are the questions Riker wants us to grapple with. She doesn't offer easy answers or anything, but
Yeah.
she wants us to think critically
Yeah.
about what this world might look like, the challenges, the opportunities.
One thing that really struck me was how Riker brings in this whole spiritual aspect of female power. He's not just talking about politics or social structures. She's connecting it to something deeper, something almost mystical.
Totally. She points to all these powerful female deities in different religions, you know?
Yeah.
Like Athena,
Right.
Isis. These weren't just pretty faces in mythology.
Right. They were forces to be reckoned with.
Exactly. They represented wisdom and creation and strength.
It's she's reminding us that female power isn't this new thing.
Yeah.
It's been there all along, woven into our history, our spirituality.
And she even argues that societies with strong female deities often had better outcomes for women in general.
Oh, really? Tell me more about that.
Yeah. She cites research showing a connection between goddess worship and higher levels of female education, economic participation, even better health outcomes. Pretty amazing, right?
So it's not just about spiritual beliefs. There could be real world tangible benefits.
Yeah, and that's how Riker challenges that traditional narrative of male-dominated religion. She's saying that the suppression of the feminine in religion has actually contributed to the subjugation of women throughout history.
That's such a powerful point. And then she brings it all back to Christianity,
Oh, yeah.
focusing on the feminine aspects of the Holy Spirit.
Which is super interesting, right?
So even within a religion that's often seen as very patriarchal,
yeah.
she's finding these elements that point to a more balanced view of gender.
And divinity.
And divinity, exactly.
Yeah.
It's she's saying, hey, even within these seemingly rigid structures, there's space for the feminine to emerge and be celebrated.
And that reclaiming those feminine aspects is essential for creating a more just and equitable world.
Okay, so we've explored history, psychology, spirituality. What's next on Riker's agenda?
Well, next she turns her attention to the legal and political arenas.
Okay.
Specifically, the family court system.
Ooh, that's a hot topic.
Yeah, and she doesn't hold back.
I bet not. What are some of the things she tackles?
She talks about presumption of maternal custody, the calculation of child support payments, even judicial gender bias.
She's basically saying that the family court system, in many cases, is stacked against fathers.
Perpetuating that whole idea of women as the primary caregivers and men as nothing more than financial providers.
Which, let's be real, is a pretty outdated and harmful stereotype.
Totally.
Does she give any examples? Like real-life stories?
She does. She shares some pretty heartbreaking stories about fathers who've been alienated from their children
Oh, man.
and financially devastated by a system that just seems to favor mothers.
That's so sad, and it's a reality that a lot of people just don't even realize.
Right. It's often overlooked.
Yeah.
And Riker shines a much-needed spotlight on it.
It's so important to hear those stories and to understand the complexities of the family court system.
Definitely. And speaking of complex issues, she also tackles the wage gap debate.
Ah, yes, the wage gap. It never fails to get people riled up.
Right.
So how does Riker approach this one?
Well, she acknowledges that there is a gap, but she argues it's not always as simple as some people make it out to be.
Oh, I bet. It's definitely a nuanced issue.
She dives into those factors like, occupational choices.
Right. Women tend to choose careers in lower-paying fields.
And that motherhood penalty.
Yeah. Women are statistically more likely to take career breaks to raise kids, which obviously impacts their earning potential over time.
Exactly. So it's not about denying the existence of a gap, but advocating for a more kind of nuanced and evidence-based approach to understanding it.
It's about looking at the whole picture, considering all the factors that contribute to it.
And then things take like a slightly darker turn when she brings up these ideas of psychological warfare and gaslighting.
Oh, wow, that's heavy. What's she saying about that?
She argues that these tactics are being used to manipulate and control men.
So to make them doubt their own experiences, their own perceptions.
Exactly. And she gives some pretty disturbing examples from personal relationships to like larger societal structures where men are being told that their feelings are invalid, that their perspectives are wrong.
That they're essentially a problem.
Exactly. And Riker argues that this is all part of a larger strategy to reinforce female supremacy by undermining men's confidence and silencing their voices.
It's a chilling thought, to be honest.
Yeah.
But she presents a pretty compelling case.
Right. It's hard to ignore the evidence she lays out.
Okay, so we've gone from history and psychology to spirituality, the legal system, even these darker aspects of social manipulation. This is some heavy stuff. Where does she take us from here?
Well, she connects it all back to her main point, recognizing the reality of female power, whether we choose to call it female supremacy or something else entirely.
So it's not just about individual beliefs or experiences. It's about these larger systemic shifts in power dynamics that are impacting all of us. Okay, so where does she go from there? Does she offer any solutions, any strategies for navigating this new world?
Well, that's where Riker dives into specific examples of how female supremacist ideologies are playing out in our world today.
Oh, okay.
Like the influence of feminist ideas on the political elite,
Mm-hmm.
the role of social media in promoting those narratives, and even how these ideologies are being woven into our education system.
It's like she's saying this isn't just some abstract theory. It's happening all around us, and it's shaping the way we think and live.
Exactly. And she gives concrete examples to back up her claims.
Like, give me some specifics.
She talks about how social media algorithms can create those echo chambers that just reinforce certain viewpoints.
Right.
How educational materials might present a biased perspective.
It's like we're being subtly indoctrinated.
And how even healthcare policies often prioritize women's needs at the expense of men's.
Wow.
Riker argues that all of these examples are evidence that female supremacist ideologies are becoming increasingly pervasive in our society.
It's not just about individual beliefs anymore. It's about these systemic shifts that are impacting all of us, whether we realize it or not.
Exactly. And that brings us to kind of the final piece of the puzzle, Riker's vision for the future.
We touched on this a bit before, but now she gets really specific about what this world under female supremacy would actually look like.
Right. She explores all these possibilities, imagining how gender roles, societal norms, even our understanding of power would be transformed.
Okay, paint me a picture. What does this world look like?
She talks about a world where men are expected to be more nurturing, more emotionally expressive, where women hold the majority of leadership positions, and where those traditional notions of masculinity are really challenged.
It's definitely a thought-provoking vision. I mean, it forces you to confront your own assumptions about how the world works.
It does. But Riker also acknowledges that achieving female supremacy isn't going to be like a walk in the park.
What are some of the challenges she anticipates?
She talks about potential backlash, from people who feel threatened by this shift in power.
Oh, definitely. People who cling to those old ways of thinking.
Exactly. And the possibility of new forms of inequality emerging.
Oh, right.
Even the internal struggles women might face
Yeah.
as they navigate this new world.
That's a good point. It's not like just flipping a switch and suddenly everything is perfect.
Right. It's going to be complex.
It's going to be messy.
It's going to be a process.
Exactly. So it's not about creating some kind of utopian society,
No.
but about challenging the status quo
Mm.
and creating a world where power is more evenly distributed.
And that's where her idea of gender equity comes in, right? It's not just about flipping the script, but creating a more balanced and just society for everyone.
That's a really important distinction. So she's not advocating for female dominance, but for a true partnership between the genders.
Exactly. And Riker makes it clear that this equity doesn't mean ignoring the differences between men and women. She actually emphasizes that recognizing those differences and valuing the unique strengths of each gender is crucial for building a truly equitable future.
So it's not about erasing gender altogether.
No.
It's about redefining what it means to be a man or a woman in a world where power is shared more equally.
Exactly. Challenging those rigid, outdated definitions.
Yeah.
And creating space for new possibilities.
Wow. We have covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have. It's been quite a journey.
From matriarchal societies to the family court system to the potential future of female supremacy, Riker really throws a lot at us.
And she does it all while encouraging critical thinking, questioning assumptions, and looking at the evidence.
It's definitely a book that makes you think, even if you don't agree with everything she says.
And that's, I think, the point.
Yeah.
Riker wants to spark a conversation, to challenge the status quo, and to push us all towards a deeper understanding of gender and power.
Well said. So as we wrap up part 2 of our deep dive into the Mirage of Male Supremacy, what are some key takeaways that our listeners should be pondering?
I think it's crucial to really consider those historical and cultural forces that have shaped our understanding of gender and power, to recognize that the narratives we've been told about male dominance, they might not be the whole story.
And to be open to the possibility that a world under female supremacy might not be the dystopia that some fear it to be, but rather an opportunity to create a more just and equitable society.
Exactly. And that Riker's book is a call to action. It's a challenge to examine our own biases, to question the systems we live in, and to imagine a future where power is distributed more equitably.
Well said. And with that, we'll take a brief pause to gather our thoughts before diving into the final part of our deep dive. Okay, deep divers, we are back for the final part of our deep dive into the Mirage of Male Supremacy.
I feel like we've been through the ringer with this one.
I know, it's like a mental workout.
Yeah, my brain is definitely feeling a little stretched.
Riker really pushes those boundaries, doesn't she?
She does, and that's what makes it so fascinating.
Totally. She takes us on this wild ride from ancient history
Right.
to modern-day social media, all while building this argument about female power.
And even when you disagree with her,
Yeah.
you have to admire her boldness.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like she's not afraid to say the things that other people are maybe thinking, but too scared to say out loud.
Exactly. And she backs up her claims with, research, statistics, anecdotes. It's all there.
So as we're kind of reflecting on this deep dive, what stands out to you the most?
For me, it was Riker's exploration of the family court system.
Oh, yeah, that was a big one.
I'd heard about that bias against fathers before, but she really laid it out, the
Yeah.
systemic issues,
Mm-hmm.
in a way that I just hadn't really considered.
Yeah, and she shared those really powerful stories.
I know, it's heartbreaking.
It's a side of the story that often gets silenced.
Yep.
For me, honestly, it was that whole psychological warfare argument.
Oh, yeah.
Those big aha moment,
Sure.
like these seemingly harmless social norms
Right.
and narratives.
Or little things we don't even think about.
Yeah. Are actually tools of manipulation.
That's kind of scary when you think about it.
It is. And Riker argues that women have become masters at this, subtly shaping perceptions, behaviors to their advantage.
It's who's really in control here?
Right. It makes you question everything.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for us, for the average person listening? What do we do with this information?
I think Riker's ultimate message is pretty simple.
Yeah.
Wake up to the reality of female power,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it. Female supremacy, gynocentrism.
Mm-hmm.
The point is, women have power.
Yeah, you do.
And it's time we acknowledge it and understand
And not just acknowledge it,
Yeah.
but harness it, right?
Yeah.
Riker is all about Empowering women
totally.
to embrace their strengths, use their power to create a better future.
Exactly. And she's not saying women need to become like domineering or cruel or anything.
Right.
It's about shifting those power dynamics in a way that benefits everyone.
So it's not about men versus women.
No, not at all.
It's about creating a more balanced
Mhm.
and equitable society.
Where everyone can thrive.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think that's a really important point to make. So we're not talking about some kind of like female takeover or anything like that.
It's not about that.
It's about recognizing that the old systems aren't working.
And they're not.
It's about writing a new story.
Yeah, a better story.
Exactly. And Riker gives us some pretty powerful tools to do that,
Mhm.
like critical thinking,
Mhm.
questioning those deep-seated beliefs.
Yeah, like don't just take things at face value.
Challenge the status quo. Don't be afraid to shake things up a little.
And she also emphasizes the importance of like sisterhood and solidarity.
Oh, yeah. Women supporting each other.
Sharing their experiences, working together.
Yeah, to dismantle those patriarchal structures.
That have held them back for far too long.
The Mirage of Male Supremacy. It's a book that stays with you.
Oh, yeah.
It sparks so many conversations for me.
Me too. And I think it's a book I'll keep coming back to.
Yeah, me too. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one question you want our listeners to walk away with? Like, what's that final thought you want to leave them with?
I would say, what would the world look like if we truly embraced the power of the feminine? Not just in women, but in all of us.
Wow. That is powerful. That's something to really sit with.
Right. Because Riker's book is just the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah, it's our job to keep it going.
Exactly. It's up to all of us to take these ideas, run with them,
Yeah.
create the world we want to see.
Well, on that note, I think we've done a pretty amazing job unpacking this book.
I think so too.
We've explored some deep, sometimes uncomfortable territory.
It wouldn't be a deep dive without it, right?
Exactly. So, deep divers, we hope this episode has challenged you.
Inspired you.
And maybe even made you a little bit uncomfortable.
Because that's where the growth happens.
So keep those minds open, those questions coming, and those conversations flowing
We'll see you next time.
for another deep dive.